So, hi, Chris. I'm Danielle with Temple of Geek. Thank you so much for taking time to talk with me today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Nice to
Yeah.
meet you. Yeah.
So, I saw Heretic a couple weeks ago, and we'll get into that in a little bit because I'm really excited to talk about that. But first, I was wondering if we could just get a little bit of background on you and the company that you founded. I understand that you've been involved with prosthetic makeup and special effects in film and TV for about 30 years now, and you're the founder of Gaslight FX Studio. I just wondered if you could tell me a little bit about your history in the field and kind of what brought you to it and what it's been like over the past 30 years.
Wow, yeah, that's a great question to start off with. So yeah, I've been doing this for a little over 30 years. I round up to 30 years. But, just growing up very creative, loving movies, I think I was just drawn, to the industry. I didn't actually know that you could be an effects makeup artist until, oh my gosh, into my teens. Like, okay, this is something I might want to do. All through high school, I was making masks and vampire teeth for my friends. So I think I was on that trajectory or
Yeah.
very early on. And I grew up in another part of Canada, Calgary, Alberta, and I moved to Toronto in 96, about that, and started working in the film industry here. And then we started Gaslight Studio, myself and my wife, and I think it was 2006. And we specialize in prosthetics and creatures and prop making and rentals and tattoos, all of it. And it's been very interesting to see the industry change over 30 years, but
Mhm.
technology has definitely played a part, which I'm sure you're wondering about. But yeah, it's been very rewarding.
Yeah, I saw on your website for Gaslight FX Studio. First of all, I was amazed by the examples you have on there of what you've done. But also, I think there's a quote from you on there about how technology is always changing, but prosthetics are always going to be needed anyway, in film and TV. And I really liked that there's still a place for these practical effects and that we need them, and that sometimes they are the best options despite technology, moving forward. Yeah. Oh,
I
sorry, go ahead.
agree. Oh no, I agree with what you're saying. No, it's very important.
Yeah. So I know you won an Emmy in 2019 for your work on Star Trek Discovery, specifically on an episode that involved the return of the Telosians, which themselves I think are kind of legacies of prosthetic makeup and special effects. And so I kind of wondered what it's like now that you're still working with Star Trek, this time in Strange New Worlds, what it's like to work with those kinds of legacy characters, I guess, that fans have an expectation of what they want to see, and just like what that's like to do.
They really do. I'm a, a diehard Star Trek fan. Original Star Treks, Kirk, Spock, the original Enterprise. I'm a big fan. And if someone even 20 years ago were to tell me it's like in the future you're gonna work on Star Trek and do Spock's makeup, I'd be like, what are you on drugs? Like that's I don't even know how that could happen. But sure enough, those projects came to Toronto and I was lucky enough to be invited aboard, and it's work that I love, it's material I love, and I think that it just provides the perfect setting to really, do amazing work. And yeah, just doing legacy characters like Spock, things
Mhm.
like that, like I find it very important, like for me, like
Yeah.
as not just like a career achievement, but just a bucket list thing too. Like it's just something I'm really proud of.
Yeah, and because you said you're a fan, I imagine it's easy to put yourself in that headspace too of what you would want to see, and you actually have the ability to make that into real life too.
Absolutely, there's a lot of expectations to make these characters correct,
Mhm.
and it's always under constant scrutiny
Yeah.
by everyone. So
Is there like I've heard so I'm a big Star Wars fan, and I know that there's like a Bible they have of what is specific to certain characters, certain types of characters. Is that the same for Star Trek?
I've never seen a Bible per se,
Hmm.
but canon is very important.
Yeah.
I know working with the actors, they didn't want to do impersonations of the
Hmm.
original characters, right? They're all bringing their own kind of energy to it, and of course, and still, fulfilling the character and everybody's expectations. They're huge shoes to fill, like I can't even imagine, but no, the expectations are high, but they do an amazing job. So we help that by
Yeah.
doing what we do.
Yeah. That kind of leads me on to Heretic, which is a bit different from your work on Star Trek, venturing away, I guess, from the kind of like sci-fi futuristic element and more into horror. And so I wondered how you approach your work when horror is involved. Does it change, or like what are the specific things you put in play for that?
So depending on the project, whether it's horror, sci-fi, medical shows, the prosthetics are basically unfolding to support the narrative. We spend a lot of time talking to the director and the producers, the writers, exploring what the prosthetics might do to serve the story. I always feel that the prosthetics should not take you out of the moment, other than it's them in themselves being believable,
Yeah.
right? So if it's a horror movie, I'll reference Haunt, which was theme directors for Heretic, Scott and Brian. They really wanted characters that weren't supernatural. These were just killers. They
Yeah.
were augmented, right? And so we spent a lot of times discussing what sort of modifications, what was possible, what would kind of make it super creepy but not cheesy. So
Mhm.
that's an approach, and a creative approach that we use in deciding what the prosthetics are going to be like. And especially for Heretic, it wasn't necessarily a prosthetics driven movie, but it added to the atmosphere and the
Mhm.
creepiness and the
Yeah.
coolness to it.
Yeah. And I think also the makeup that went into play with that as well, because there are certain characters that required, I imagine, heavy prosthetic makeup or special effects. And that also adds to the creepiness, I think, that you were talking about, and the psychological horror for that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you mentioned that you spent some time speaking with the directors to kind of get an idea of what you're going to do. What is the process like outside of that? So when you're going to make it, like when you make mock-ups or anything like that, what does that kind of look like?
Well, we do a lot of brainstorming internally. We look at reference of, things that we might pull from in nature, if it's a creature, if it's catastrophic injuries, things
Hmm.
like that, for kills and mayhem and things like that. So we do a lot of research for that. We'll do concept drawings, we'll do possibly sculptural maquettes to present. Any visual aids really help the creative portion of production to kind of look at, the directions that we're taking, and approval. There's this approval process that's really,
Hmm.
the last thing you want to do is bring something to set that no one's seen or approved, and it
Yeah.
can be surprising. So we make sure we're very transparent about the designs, that people, they always have an opinion, they want to weigh in and put little tweaks along the way, and that's something that we try and accommodate.
Yeah. When it comes to Heretic, with that, the scene with the arm,
Yeah,
I won't give too much away for anyone who hasn't seen it yet. If you haven't, though, I highly encourage you to, because it's a great movie. What I like so much about that specific scene with that is that it's a really effective use of kind of mild body horror, but with a really good sense of levity to it as well. And of course, a lot of that goes onto the direction and the acting. But I imagine a lot is placed on what the actor has as a prop to do that, which is where you come in and your team. And so I wondered, like, kind of what goes through your mind when you're making those props that you know are going to have to be used in that way, which I guess is probably the same for like medical shows as well. But
absolutely. I think there's a difference a lot of times in medical shows, especially like operation scenes. We'll have
mhm.
a body on a table, and it's like, it's kind of sits there and it does its thing. But when you put a prosthetic, in this case, the prosthetic arm for Sister Barnes, it it had to look natural,
Yeah.
right? And the gag itself kind of screams unnatural because we already have an arm there. To put another arm there, it's like, well, what do you do with this one?
Hmm.
So it was all about angles and, hiding this arm so we could put on this other arm. And it was a prosthetic that was fully articulated, anatomically correct, it had layers of muscle and veins. It was
Wow.
ready to bleed. It had the little, oh, here I am, I'm spoiling it,
Oh.
it anyway, it was just designed to work on camera, without any tight inserts. It had to
Hmm.
be done in its entirety for the
Hmm.
scene. And yeah, it was fun.
How many of those did you make?
So we made 3 arms,
Mhm.
but we only used one.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
And that comes down to just sometimes in filmmaking, even though you have resets, if the first one's good, they kind of want to move on to
Yeah.
the next scene, right?
Yeah, like you get it down, then yeah, you don't want to risk like messing that up. No, that's amazing to me. And if anyone who's seen the movie as well, it's probably as amazing to them as well because it's a great scene. I have a bit of a strong stomach, but even watching it, I was still kind of just like, oh, because they spend a lot of time on it.
Hugh really did such a great job. The gag was rigged so that the implant was just under the skin,
Hmm.
and we put little freckles on the skin so he would know where to cut,
Oh, that's clever.
right? Yeah, and it was very highly organized and rehearsed, except for the practicality of actually
Hmm.
doing it on screen.
Yeah.
And so, of course, then a million things can go wrong. But he cut the skin, and he took a couple of moments. He couldn't quite find it off the bat. So he was digging in it and pulled out that vein, and it actually made it better.
Yeah.
But then, oh, here's the implant. It's like, no, wait.
Nope.
Oh, here it is. And it was just so icky. It was awesome.
No, that's great because that added the sense of levity that I was talking about that I think that film is so good at. But no, that's amazing. Thank you for telling me all that. Do you do the freckle trick often?
It comes in handy, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we can't put a big red X,
Yeah, yeah.
and actors, they want to know where they're gonna
Yeah.
do their slicing. So
Mhm.
yeah, we try to help out as much as
Yeah. Yeah, no,
possible.
it's clever. I never thought about that before about there being, guides on the
A
prop
mole,
specifically made into it for that.
yeah,
That's great.
yeah, yeah, with lots of things. You put a mole or a little bit of hair or something, like
Hmm.
depending on where it is. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Love that. When it comes to the other elements that you worked on for Heretic, specifically the women, I don't know
The
what
profits.
specifically called them prophets, yes. What was it like working with them?
So the profits were a great project in itself. Like, you're taking this beautiful woman and you have to make her into this emaciated and tortured and just this poor creature. And so we spent a lot of time working out different aspects that we could do to change their appearance, change their face. And so when we got to the day and we're gluing everything on to them, they really embraced the prosthetics, and they used that to kind of propel their performance even
Mhm.
further.
About how long did it take to get them ready for those scenes?
The hero prophet is Mrs.
Hmm.
Reed,
Hmm.
the one we see eating the
Hmm.
pie. That was about 2.5 hours for 2 people. I
Yeah,
had them there.
yeah,
It's myself and an assistant. Yeah.
yeah. How big is your team, by the
It
way?
depends from project to
It's
project.
project. Yeah,
Yeah, on set it could be 2, 3 people. In the shop, small army.
yeah, yeah. That makes sense. So with the kind of moving off of that, with the 30 years that you've or over 30 years, I guess, that you've been doing this, I imagine that you've done and seen so much when it comes to this field. But is there anything that like you haven't done that you wish you want to, or something that you've done that you would like to do more of?
Wow, yeah, for sure. So I love character makeup. So I love like old age makeups and
Mhm.
changing people's appearance. I mean, creatures are great, and slasher films and slit throats and all that,
Mhm.
it's all fun to do. But I think the real challenging work is to really achieve that reality, you know,
Mhm.
of like a cool old age or character makeup. So any opportunity to do those things, I really love and embrace. Projects I would love to be involved with, like I'm a big fan of Star Wars as well.
All right.
You can love Star Trek and Star Wars.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
the heart wants what the heart wants. And so I think that would be a very exciting opportunity if something like that were to happen. I'd definitely take that opportunity. And yeah, I love science fiction anyway, so those projects really excite me as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like a lot of people say Star Wars because there's so much, I was thinking practical, there's so much practical effect with that still, especially when they want to keep it, homages to the originals and what they used. And I imagine that that would be just a dream to be able to do as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the world is so rich with aliens. It's like the Wild West of science
Yeah.
fiction, right? So it's like, you know, if I were to compare it to Star Trek, especially Strange New Worlds, it's like you're always looking at the timeline,
Hmm.
and it's like, well, what aliens are present? Because in Star Trek, especially Strange New Worlds and the original Trek timeline, there's only a certain amount of aliens that humans have come in contact with.
Yeah.
So we like to think about Star Wars, and it's like any you can see any kind of
Yeah.
creature on any world, and that's always that opens up so many more possibilities too for fun.
Hmm. I
Yeah,
can imagine that.
yeah.
And this is kind of off topic, not really, but the Telosians were the first aliens in Star Trek, were they? Is that correct that I read? And I
Yeah,
I think that was right.
those were the aliens from the cage.
Yeah, yeah,
That's
that's what it was.
right. And they have
Yes.
the big swelled head, is that right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
So yeah, I love that episode as well. And they're really cool aliens.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know that it got a lot of, I mean, obviously you won an Emmy for that episode, but
Myself and I was on a
and your
great
team,
team.
yeah.
Yeah, and it was I think I don't want to be misquoted here, but I think that
Mhm.
was the first Emmy that the recent Star Trek has had for
Oh
TV.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. That's great. Yeah.
But
Check that.
anyway,
Yeah, if that is, that's
huge honor,
amazing. Yeah.
huge honor. Yeah.
It is, oh my God, yeah. Well, I've seen the episode and it's definitely deserved. You and your team did an excellent job with all of that, with all of the Star Trek and with Heretic as well. Going off of that, do you have a favorite project that you've done or favorite? I know that you have large breadth of to choose from, but
I mean, I've I've loved my entire career. Every project has added something new, a fun aspect to it that I'm, I grow from and really embrace. I mean, I love working on 300. We shot that in Montreal
Mhm.
for 3 months on a green screen, and we had to paint abs on all these Spartans day in and day out, just things like that it was so much fun. We worked on the remake of The Thing shot here in Toronto. And of course, that was a dream come true too.
Mhm.
You know, the effects for that were amazing as well. But I think Strange New Worlds kind of tops the scale for me just because I am such a diehard fan
Yeah.
and grew up with it. And so just I think that, that's I think my favorite experience.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
great. Well, it's a good favorite experience to have for sure.
Mhm.
Well, thank you so much for speaking with me today. I learned a lot. Thank you for sharing all of that insight to this. I'm gonna go rewatch Heretic after this and pay attention to that scene just a little bit closer.
A little bit
Yeah,
closer.
yeah, just a
Yeah,
little bit
yeah, for sure. Well,
closer.
thank you for your time, Danielle.
Yeah, of course. It was lovely to meet you.
How are you too?
Okay. All right. Bye.
Bye bye.